Director of KRS Home Care. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing a fabulous nurse practitioner from nursejournal.org. Her name is Miss Joelle Jean, and her days begin with thinking about others, right? She has compassion. She's built a career as a nurse and has now married her passion for writing. So now she is the senior nurse journalist. And I'm happy to hear more about her work and spread the word about her compassion towards writing and the health industry in general. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So first off, we'll just get right into it. And I know you've answered this question before. What piqued your interest as a nurse? And I know you come from a family of nurses, so please feel free to give us more information about your lovely history with nursing.
Yeah, well, so that started back in 2003 when I graduated from college. I never wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to have that glamorous life of working for a magazine and like doing communications, marketing, because that was what was like really thriving at that time. But my mom always encouraged me. She's a nurse. My aunts are nurses. My dad is a doctor. So she always encouraged me. She saw something in me, obviously, that she thought like, wow, you should really go into nursing. So after graduating from college, literally 2 weeks later, I started my prerequisites. I took them at Hunter College, and then I finished them up at NYU, and I did it as a second degree nurse. So I did an accelerated nursing program at NYU. So it took me about 15 to 18 months to graduate. And I made the best decision at that time. I would never look back and say, oh, this is the worst decision I made. It was the best decision for me to become a nurse.
Fantastic. Oh my goodness. And so, since it's in your roots, it runs through your family, do you feel there was a particular moment in time ever? Because I know this wasn't something you envisioned yourself doing, right? But I know growing up with your mom, some things that she's doing must have inspired you. So is there anything that you remember in particular, or something that you share with your children that made you know, like, this is the best thing for me?
Yeah, that's a great question. My mom is like the sweetest person ever. She loved kids, she loved being a nurse. She's retired now, but we would be brought into the hospital when she was there. I saw what she did growing up. We would bypass the emergency room and see doctors like directly if something was wrong with us. So yeah, I mean, not that I was conscious of it, but I knew my mom was like a caring person. She loved taking care of children. She was patient, and just, that's the type of nurse that I actually ended up becoming. And I did pediatrics. That was me. I knew a lot of my nursing like other nursing friends, they were like, oh, I would never do peds, or they were like, how do you know what you want to do yet? But I always knew that I was going to be a pediatric nurse, and that's what my mom was. And that's another unconscious thing too. I knew, it wasn't like, oh, I want to work with kids all day long, but that's what ended up happening. So just an
Wow.
example, just seeing her grow up, just, the whole ironing her uniform and having like the white shoes. You had to make sure that they're had, I don't know what it's called now, but you had to put like kind of like a shoe shine on
Right.
it, like a paint shine. I don't really remember what the name is, but she used to do that like every Sunday, get everything ready for the week. So, it was a kind of routine that I saw growing up. And it was nice that she saw that in me, because, ended up turning out really great.
Yeah, that's the kind of like her legacy being built, right? What like unconsciously, like you don't really know, what your legacy will consist of. But the fact that you were inspired by her, that it really rings true. And I bet you in your community, you meet others who have a similar story, right?
Yeah.
So I do want to touch on that a little bit further, right? So I know your transition from being a full-time nurse to now writing, right? Like that's an amazing story in itself. So I know that you didn't transition because of the pandemic, but I'm certain that you had a little bit of luck with timing as well, right? With your transition. So I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Oh yeah. So I was an English major undergrad. Actually, I don't remember if I said that or not. I
Oh,
always loved to write. Since I was 10 years old, I would create these children book stories. Always loved, I liked to read. I wasn't an avid reader, but if I had a good book, I loved it. Um Favorite authors like Judy Blume and who else did I like? I can't think of her name right now. But yeah, I just love to write for as long as I can remember. So while I was a nurse, I did write for certain publications inside the hospital. They would do like quarterly journals, and I would write articles for them. And then I actually started following a nurse. Her name is Katie Harris. She is the owner of Nursepreneurs, and she would interview nurses that have started their own business or nurses that have transitioned out of the hospital and decided to do other things in healthcare. And there was one nurse that I really, admired. Her name is Portia Woodford, and she was a nurse, and she also started her first. She started a business, a freelance writing business. So she would hire nurses that like to write, and we would write content for different websites. So I reached out to her, and she had like a membership. So I started working for her and writing different articles and just getting like the really positive feedback. Like she was saying, this is great writing, and this, and it was just solidified like, oh, this is not as hard to get into.
yeah.
um so she, what inspired me to work with her too, she was a nurse, she was a writer, and she was African American. So all that things, I was like, oh, she can do that, I can do that too.
That's
So fast forward, I wrote for her as a freelance writer for a year during the pandemic. I was writing articles as well as working as a family nurse practitioner. And this opportunity for Nurse Journal came up. I just found it through Indeed, and I applied, and it was perfect timing. Like you said, I went through the application process. They needed like someone, an expert in the nursing profession that also writes. And then I ended up getting the position. That was in June. So my year is coming up, and it was like the best thing that could have happened. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they love like how it was just presented. The universe said, here's this opportunity for you. And it's like exactly tailored for you, and especially with your personality, like you're able to show on their social media through the YouTube as well. Like I'm seeing all these interviews that you're doing now. And, one person that really inspired me in my journey is Oprah. And Oprah has this way of communicating, and you
My
remind
vision
me
board.
of her energy.
Oh,
So, and with that being said, like it's up and coming where because I haven't heard about, nurses journaling and this sort of new atmosphere that's being created on social media for really nurses to share their knowledge and skills and their wisdom. Like it's crucial, it's important to have that. So first off, thank you for your contribution. We appreciate it so much. And with that being said, Oprah has a quote where she says education is a passport for freedom, right? And, in regard to other nurses or aspiring nurses in this field, I feel like that's one piece of advice that maybe, you would share too is that education really is that passport for freedom within your industry. And then, of course, your personality for networking and interviews and all that. But, being in Queens and doing the work that you're doing, is there anything in particular that you would share with someone who's, let's say, a younger viewer, or even like an aspiring mom like myself, who just, I look to nurses and I go, oh wow, I just wish I had that knowledge. So what would you share with sort of the resources you've gathered today?
Oh, wow. You know, I mean, so cliche, but never give up. If it's something that that you want to do, and I always encourage people to go into nursing. Always. Like if they don't know what they want to do with their life, I'm like, why don't you go into nursing? Only because there's so many avenues that you can go down. The hardest part is getting into the nursing program. It's very tough. They reject, I think there's like 50 seats. If you're trying to go to like through a community college, it's like 50 seats that they have because there's a huge shortage of nurse educators. So it's hard to accept a lot of students and there's no one to teach them. So the hardest part is getting in. There are some ways you can get in. You can go through a community college, or you take your prerequisites at a slower pace, or you start as a nurse assistant, then you go into the LPN program, and through the LPN program you get your BSN online, and then you apply to go to whichever hospital or facility that you want to work for. So there are avenues, but once you're in and you take your boards and you pass, it's literally a passport to education.
Right. And then
Because
to supplement, you do
yeah,
mentorship, right?
yeah,
So
yes,
that like goes hand in hand, right? Like find yourself a mentor once you're in,
yeah,
or if you have, you know what I mean? Find one ASAP if you can. And
exactly.
you've done the clinical teaching, so you know what that's like, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I luckily I've found mentors, but I'm very I'm a manifester. Like what I want, I'm going to go after. So if there's a professor that I'm like, oh my God, I really relate to them, or they're nice, I will really gravitate towards those type of people to help me to where I need to get to today. Just like I talked about Portia, who's the freelance writer, like even then I was just like, what do I need to do to like break into this industry, and she's been great in helping me transition into becoming a nurse writer. So yeah, mentorship is huge. I really encourage students to find that, even if it's not even in your school, if it's in your church or someone in your community, someone online, like leverage social media to really try to find that person that will help you get to where you need to go.
Absolutely. What I would like to hear is, one of your personal experiences, whether it's directly involved in nursing or in writing, but maybe something between your coworkers or, a recovered patient, something in your experiences that's either inspiring or, it's brought some sort of value to your life and to the lives of other people you're working with, right?
Um, just in terms of like what I, as a nurse, like working as a nurse. Oh wow. So I mean I worked in the pediatric emergency room. So we literally saw pretty much everything from the average fever for an hour to, doing CPR on patients. Um, I have hundreds, well, not hundreds of stories, but I have, a handful of stories that did shape how I was as a nurse or who I am today. I've had, a cancer patient that came in, talking, and ended up passing away within that hour. So that was very traumatic. And one good thing about working in the emergency room, we would do debriefs, which when something like a trauma came in, and the outcome didn't necessarily have to be bad, but we would, once everything was over, we'd come as a group and really analyze what happened, what we did great, what we can improve on, what we're going to do different if something similar to this happens again. So where I worked, it was a teaching hospital, so it was great in that sense. Um, I've done CPR. I've had um, emergency where a patient you thought just came in for a fever and they ended up having like an appendicitis or something. So I've seen it all. It just makes you appreciate life really, much more. Um, a lot of people say once you have kids you won't be able to do pediatrics, but I love it. I love kids. Like, I think a lot of people don't go into it because of the parents, but I mean, as at the end of the day, you have to meet the parent where they're at. There, it's high stress. If your kid is sick, you're not going to be a bed of roses, right? So you have to meet them where they're at. You have to like bring them down to a comfortable level, figure out what they need. Do they need something to eat? Do they need a pillow? Do they need to speak to a family member? Like, you have to be that person that mediates what's going on with their child. But like I said, I loved peds. It didn't change me when I had my own children. It's not for everyone, but in terms of that experience, like, I wouldn't change that for the world. I love adults too. I ended up working with adults as a family nurse practitioner. I never thought I would work with adults. I always thought, like, if you're a peds nurse, always a peds nurse. But I ended up loving adults too, because you're educating, they ask questions. I've met, like, that's one thing I miss about patient care is talking to my patients. It'd be 20 minutes, but I could learn about their whole life in 20 minutes. So I do miss that part. But yeah, that's my whole career. 16 years as a nurse and a nurse practitioner. So it definitely shaped who I am, and it's a great profession.
Incredible insights. And I am so grateful that you would still be willing to work with peds because they're just so sweet. And I do know a nurse, pediatric nurse myself personally. It's my mother-in-law's friend, very sweet nurse. And it is so challenging, and even, she doesn't have any children and is still doing it all this time, and I find that really unique too. You can be in any sort of family situation and still support the community. But I find it interesting that after having kids, it might change for a nurse. And that's something to think about, especially those who are aspiring, right, and they're building their family, all things to consider. But listening to someone like who's not had their opinion changed, and you're still inspired, like that in itself is an achievement, right? Like, you've really enjoyed your career and have had this fulfillment. So it's really nice to hear that perspective, so thank you. Yeah. And so, what do you feel is the best part about being a nurse personally, or even a nurse writer, right?
Yeah. Well, the nurse writing part, I love the freedom. It's just me. I meet with my manager once a week, but at the end of the day, like, I create the pace of when I write, how I write. I mean, I do have deadlines, but at the end of the day, I'm at home, it's remote. I get to really do research on things. I mean, I'm a nurse, but I don't know every single thing that's happening in nursing. So there's a lot of things that surprised me, a lot of research that I had to have done just to figure certain things out. So I definitely um, love that aspect of it. In terms of my nursing career, um, no, it's just, again, it's just been very fulfilling and um yeah, I don't, yeah, I can't really say anything negative
Yeah, like
about it.
overall, it's great. It
Yeah,
has like, positive points to each aspect. So it's kind of hard to highlight like one particular thing. I
yeah.
understand that. And so with that being said, what's one of the biggest takeaways? I feel like we could easily touch back on how you mentioned like don't give up. I think that mantra in itself, never give up, is really key. And I I know too, through like childbirth, birth, as you would know, right? Like when I was giving birth, I said, I can do this, right? And it's like repeating that mantra to yourself, like, I never give up. And so I think that's a big takeaway. But if I could ask you, are there any other big takeaways that you've had from certain work experiences or being with certain patients, right? Of course, it's like the value of life and time. But is there anything like in particular that was said to you, like maybe you touched a patient or a family? What's a big takeaway that you can think of?
I mean, honestly, like I said, being like a nurse practitioner, just being in I worked at like an urgent care center, so it was like one room, me and the patient. Um, I've heard stories where, like uh one of the patients, her mom couldn't go back to her country because she married interracially. Or I had patients where we would do physicals on commercial drivers, and there's certain criteria you have to meet in order to um, pass them. And even if they don't pass, they still have to pay and all this stuff. So I remember having a truck driver, his blood pressure was literally through the roof. And I'm like, I cannot pass you. Like,
Wow.
you can stroke out, heart attack, whatever you can have, and this is their livelihood. So can you imagine that, like, you're saying no, you can't drive because your blood pressure is so high, but my job is to make sure that you get healthy and not kill anybody on the road. So I remember being like, listen, I know your blood pressure is high. I know you need this job, but if you were my dad or my uncle or my brother, like, I cannot let you live like this. And I have to see you as that person in order for me to say, you need to go to a higher level of care to get your blood pressure under control so you can so you can drive your truck. And,
Right.
I think that really resonated with him. I wanted him to know, I'm human, you're human. I'm treating you like I would treat my own family, and you just need to get help.
Wow.
So that, like, I would have things like that. I've had psych patients that have had a mental, breakdown in my office where I'd have to like literally close down the whole clinic until the ambulance came to literally,
Wow.
they needed that time,
Yeah.
they needed that safety, that security. And that's it. For me, it's like once I have that one patient, it's just all about you. So, I've had things like that. I mean, I've had great stories. I've had crazy stories. I mean, I could go on forever.
I know. And you brought up a good point though. You actually brought up a point to transition me. Now, I love hearing that because not everyone has an advocate, like, a wife sitting there or that family member, like you said, right? So for you to just jump into that role, just, we thank you for that again, for your service, because that is what is needed on this planet.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, burnout is a huge topic. And I know you've been talking about this and you're passionate about it. And in your role now, like you've probably experienced it. So you can talk about it, with this confidence and with this actual sense of reality. Like you've lived it, right? You're not just like, well, here's the stuff to help you out. You're like, no, I
Mhm.
am the person that's going to give you that sense of balance. So I wanted to go over before we're done today. I wanted to go over I think it's 5 key points you have for burnout, right? And just talk a bit more about that. I really liked how you described it as enmeshment, the last point. And I do feel that this is something that we try to advocate within our company. We have presently a program running. It's called Retrain Your Brain Bootcamp, and it's run by Dr. Irene, who's a friend of Kyle, the owner of KRS Home Care, and she runs this program for our company for free. So she would charge other companies, but even if you know nurses who want to join, reach out to me, because through our company we can have you join this program. It helps you to go from stress to success, as she was a doctor, or is a doctor, who experienced her own professional burnout, right? And it ended in a car crash. That was her professional burnout. You don't want to end up like that, right? And so this is why her story is so inspiring to me. And I share this program with our employees because I really value their well being. In society, we need more healthcare heroes. And how do we keep them at their best? Through programs like this, and through individuals like yourself who are actually doing the work and putting out the content to create and spread the awareness. So, if you will, if we could jump in just a little bit before we're out of time.
Yeah, I mean, burnout is something that's kind of interesting to talk about because I think some people are burnt out and they don't even know. Like I honestly feel like I had, you know, not post traumatic burnout, but being out of the emergency room for, 3 years, now I could be like, oh my God, I was so burnt out. We would come into the emergency room with 200 patients waiting to be seen, or have rooms waiting for beds, waiting for discharge every single time I went into the ER. So for me, burnt out, even though I didn't know I was in it, I was in it. So
Yeah,
I mean, I would advise people to take mental health breaks, self-care. I'm a huge advocate for self-care. Just doing programs like you said, that's offered through your company. Just really taking the time to say no instead of saying yes to everything. It's really hard. And then another thing too I think is huge is just like nursing advocacy. Like a lot of we're not taught how to change policy and legislation in nursing. Like we need to, if we're not in the room, the decisions are going to be made for us, right? So
yeah,
if we are in the rooms, on the standing floors, demanding what we need to be great providers, that's another avenue to explore.
absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because my very first interview on the podcast, I had an NP on, and she's from Canada, from London actually. And she mentioned that she's going into policy writing and legislation, and it's really in regard to palliative care, because there really is nothing supporting end of life care. And so she saw that need. I'm going to be catching up with her soon, but individuals like herself who are doing that groundwork, and then, like you mentioned, being an advocate and saying, hey, this is how we move things, this is how we get bills passed and create the change that needs to be made. So thank you for saying that, and thank you so much for your time. You're just such a joy and a light, and we look
No, thank
forward
you
to
so
having
much.
your writing on our website, because that's manifesting itself.
Yes, I love it. I can't wait. I'm super excited for that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time with us. If there's
Awesome.
any closing thoughts you have, or like any more mantras you have for our healthcare community, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, again, you can't give to others unless you pour into yourself. That's a huge thing. um Compassion, empathy, these are all great traits to have to become a nurse. just really becoming in tune with yourself, manifesting things that you want in your life, having a vision board, or Oprah's on my vision board, and Michelle Obama. So, all those things. I know it sounds so kooky and like
Well, it
really
doesn't.
cheesy. I mean, some people are like, what? Like, I had a vision board party with my cousins, and some of them were like,
That's a great
we don't really want
idea,
to.
Joelle. Stop. We need to
Yes.
do that.
But,
Okay.
but they ended up liking it in the end. They were like even more excited than me towards the end. So at the end of the day, like, do whatever inspires you, that you're passionate about. Life is short, and
That's
be
right.
kind to others. That's basically, you know.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Um,
Such an angel, earth angel, literal earth angel. I want you in my family.
but
Thank you,
anytime if you want
Joelle.
another interview, anything,
Yes.
I'm
And
available.
just let everyone know your social medias before we go.
Yeah, I am at Joelle Writes About on Instagram and on LinkedIn, Joelle Waijean, and I write for nursejournal.org. I am the senior writer for that website, which writes about everything and anything about nursing.
Fabulous. Thank
Thank
you.
you.